Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This week we will be reading the Torah portion of Kedoshim. And first and foremost, Kedoshim accentuates the all-encompassing nature of the Torah and how Torah guides and governs all aspects of our life, both our ritual observances, our civil observances, our social interactions, and all of these things together and inseparably bring us to the state of Kedoshim, that we can attain this fulfillment of holiness and self-fulfillment in life. And one of the interesting mitzvahs, which are mentioned here and also is repeated also later in the book of Devarim in Parshat Kiseitze, is the law of weights and measures, that a person has to have just weights and measures, and that it is a violation, it is a negative commandment, not only to actually execute a transaction with a false weight and measure, but even to make one, even to keep one in one's house, is also going to be prohibited. Later in Parshat Kiseitze, the Torah also says that a person should not have two measures in their possession, one an honest measure and one a corrupted weight and measure. And this, to a certain extent, illuminates for us this idea of what a weight and measure is, because in a conceptual sense, a measure is not just something that we use in commercial transactions to weigh things and to measure things out, but it is also, to use more contemporary language, it is our moral compass. It is the way we give weight and the way we assess life around us and the things that we do. And each and every one of us must possess this inner moral compass to do things which is guided by and which is synchronized by the laws of the Torah. And what one can be susceptible to is having two different moral compasses, having one moral compass for one area of life and a separate moral compass for another. And as our life divides between the ritual and the social, it is sometimes easy to fall into this. Well, in one area of law, I will be scrupulous. My moral compass will be synchronized. There will be no light whatsoever, no interruption whatsoever between myself and the Shulchan Aruch. And all of a sudden, when it comes to the other area of life, we have a different synchronization to our moral compass. Perhaps our moral compass is synchronized more to the ways of the world and to the morality of society in general. This is, of course, what the Torah tells us, that Kedoshim, holiness, can only be attained when we are all in, when the same standards that we apply to our religious life are the same standards and the same ethics that we apply to our life outside of ritual practice. And this is a very important reminder. Some people need the reminder that that it is inadequate just to be scrupulous in religious law. One must be honest and decent and scrupulous when it comes to their business and so forth. And for other people, they claim just that human morality, that ethical behavior is all that counts, and when it comes to the religious part, they seem to walk to a different tune. And so this is what the Torah is telling us in Parshas Kedoshim, that there has to be one moral compass, one standard, and that is the God-given standard, who knows what's best who knows what's best for all areas of life. And it's particularly has to do with the mitzvah of false weights and measures, because unlike other types of trickery and deception, where it is only about fooling the other person, either overtly stealing from them or somehow tricking them into tricking them. When it comes to weights and measures, what really is going on is the person is fooling themselves. There is a famous statement from the Marash. Yesterday was the Marash's birthday, Beis Iyar. Today is the 3rd of Iyar. And he says that in Yiddish it goes, and it even works in English, but in Yiddish it goes, as the Eberster nart man nit, the Welt nart man nit, oi bazei, was is the Kunst in opnar and anar, that the world we're not going, the God we don't fool, that's for sure. Other people, the world around us, also we're not going to fool. Then what's the big deal in being able to fool a fool? But this is what it all revolves around, because the source for all future inappropriate behavior usually starts with an act of self-deception. Usually we convince ourselves that what we are doing is morally acceptable, if not perfectly morally correct. We are a decent business person. We have a scale. We use weights and measures. If that scale is slightly off, well, that's okay. We deceive ourselves into thinking that. And that, what might be considered a minute act of self-deception, is not only, of course, in and of itself a breach of appropriate conduct, but it opens up the path to even more egregious actions. The Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, used to say that when a person is lost deep in the forest, they weren't on the right path, and one turn led them to being deeply and irrevocably lost. There was one wrong turn, and that wrong turn in and of itself was repairable, and it did not take them that far off the course. But the nature of one wrong turn is to lead to other wrong turns. And so what the Torah is telling us, to maintain an ethical life, it will be a good life. It will be essential, not just that we behave properly towards others, but that we guard ourselves from this self-delusion, that we guard ourselves from self-dishonesty, because self-dishonesty is worse than being dishonest with another. Being dishonest with another, like the Rebbe Marash teaches us, they'll catch us one day and we'll be wrapped and we will suffer the consequences. Being dishonest with oneself is much worse, much more insidious, and we have to be much more on guard from it, because the human mind, in its bias, in its self-love, has a way of sometimes playing tricks on us. And that's the most important thing, is not just not to trick another, but not to allow ourselves to be tricked by ourselves. And this all helps us on the path of reaching Kedoshim Tiyu, to be holy and to participate in Hashem's holiness. Any questions?